Welcome to episode 2 of the Fergo and the Freak podcast. Yes, podcast, not podcast, as I called it in episode 1. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRLP. And joining me is League Freak, who you can find on Twitter at League Freak. How is the glorious King of Rugby League podcast today?
I'm very good. I've had coffee, I've had a McDonald's breakfast, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I too had a McDonald's breakfast and made sure it's something with meat in it, so I feel human.
Excellent.
And yeah, made sure I stayed up till 3, so I didn't get much sleep, so I should be at my perkiest best again.
Fantastic. That's how you do it. You burn the candle at both ends and die of a young age. Yeah. That's how you do it.
As they say, yeah, you get plenty of sleep when you're dead.
Mm.
No much point wasting it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of death, we're going to be looking at a lot of NRL clubs that have come and gone over the years in today's podcast, and then looking at teams that could be relocated and teams that could be areas that we could expand to as well in the future. So, without any further ado, I'll go through the history of what's happened so far. This is just on the NRL and its predecessing competition. So the game began in 1908, and initially there were 8 clubs formed. We had Balmain, East, Glebe, Newtown, North Sydney, South Sydney, Western Suburbs, and St George. Talks at Newcastle initially failed, but a return visit saw them join the league. So, in a rather clumsy sort of decision, the league decided to axe St George because they didn't want to have an odd number of teams. But after a week of competition, they then included a team from Cumberland. So, poor old St George. Cumberland struggled for numbers, so much so that in their last game in 1908 against North, they had to borrow one of their players. And after that match, they were pretty much cut. The end of the chaotic 1909 season, Newcastle left to create their own competition, and a team from Annandale was brought in to replace them for the 1910 season. In 1919, the ailing Annandale side, who had a 37-year-old Arthur Butler and had managed to get former Balmain Test player Bob Graves to return after being retired for 5 years, to come in and try and help the club, but it didn't work, and by the end of 1920, they were also axed. 1920 also saw an amateur team come into competition in Sydney University. They were basically cellar dwellers for their entire existence, except for the 1926 season where they made the grand final, losing to the champion South side. In 1921, St George finally got their promotion to first grade, and it was a bit of a gentle introduction given it was a short season. 1929 saw the ugly death of the Glebe team, and after a few... They had only had a few lean seasons prior to that happening, so there's still a lot of animosity about what happened there.
What happened there? Why did Glebe die off?
There was talk that the dynamic of the area had changed, and it wasn't so much a working class area anymore. Plus, you also had Balmain and Newtown and South are all sort of in the very close proximity there. And it was those clubs who ultimately saw about the demise of Glebe behind the scenes because they broke up the Glebe area and split it amongst themselves. So,
well, that's very nice.
there's quite a bit of a conflict of interest in that regard.
Yeah. I can't believe there was conflict of interest in rugby league administration. That's kind of shocking to me. Wow.
What was it? 6 years after that, 1935, the game expanded to its first new territory, and that was Canterbury. They didn't move far. 2 years later, 1937, the university side folded. After that, we had a lot of prosperity and growth with no real loss for quite a while. So 1947, Parramatta and Manly came in. 20 years later, Penrith and Cronulla joined the competition.
Yes! Go the Mighty Panthers!
I thought you were going for the Sharks there. In 1982, the game made its first bold expansion moves when it brought in teams from Canberra and Illawarra. At the end of 1983, this is where rugby league starts getting a bit messy from this point. So financial pressure started to take their toll, with Newtown, West, Cronulla and South all in pretty bad shape financially. The game decided to cull the Magpies and relocate Newtown to Campbelltown. West rallied, raised funds, and then offered to play at Campbelltown, which was enough to see them reinstated, and it left Newtown in the lurch, and they were basically cut because of that.
Wow, I didn't know that, hey?
A lot of people don't realise that there was a bit of a fight going on between West and Newtown for the Campbelltown region there.
Well, yeah, no idea. Far out.
It made sense for West to have that area, so I think that was the reason why they got the go ahead there. Basically around the corner from where they were based anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
1988 saw the boldest expansion up to that time happen when they introduced 3 teams: Brisbane, Gold Coast Tweed, and Newcastle. In 1995, as the Super League war was starting to build up, 4 teams were introduced. We had North Queensland, South Queensland, the Western Reds, and Auckland Warriors. So in the 82 seasons after the debut year, the game had introduced 8 new teams, but in the 14 years from 82 to 95, 9 teams had already been brought in. The ARL secured 12 of the 20 teams for the 1996 competition for the 1997 season, where we had 2 competitions. You had the 8 remaining sides with Super League, 12 teams with the ARL. So Super League created the Adelaide and the Hunter teams. When the game reunited after that one woeful season, we had the NRL. We ended up with a 20-team competition. Hunter, the Western Reds and South Queensland all folded, and Melbourne was born. 1999 was ugly for traditionalists of the game. St George merged with Illawarra. Adelaide and the Gold Coast were cold. Balmain and West were merged at the end of 99. So too were North and Manly. And Souths were completely cut altogether. In 24 months, 5 of the initial 8 teams that were formed in 1908 had been killed off. Between them, they'd won a total of 52 titles.
Wow.
It showed you pretty much how the business side of things became more important than the loyal side of things, I guess.
Yeah, and it was cutthroat. It was just like, yeah, you're out. That's it.
Pretty much, yeah. 2000 saw the debut of the new merged sides, West Tigers and the Northern Eagles. In 2002, South were readmitted into the NRL. At the end of the year, the Northern Eagles disbanded and Manly were readmitted into the comp in 2003. And in 2007, we had the Gold Coast Titans join up.
And that's where we are today.
That's where we are right now, looking at more expansion.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to do today. And it's interesting to see that from the beginning, where obviously the game was established, there was a very long period where the game kind of just consolidated its strength, especially because Sydney was a growing city. People need to remember that too. And just being able to get around. I mean, if you live in Sydney now, you know how difficult it is to get around now with the highways and stuff we got. I can't even imagine how difficult it was to get around in, 1930. But yeah, there was a long time where the competition was very stable and they only expanded every, few decades. And the messy part is where the game is in its modern era. You would kind of think that it would have been the other way around as the league was just getting established, that it would have been messier, but no, it wasn't at all.
Yeah, that's right. I think you had the whole baby boomer period there just after World War II, where we had 4 teams come in 20 years, and it was done carefully but methodically as well, because none of those teams, with the exception of I suppose Cronulla, have actually really been in any sort of period where they look like they might be getting cut or something like that. Cronulla's always had those financial issues, but on the other hand, they've always, their one big anchor which has kept them there is the fact they always own their own ground.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because when you look at Penrith being brought into the competition, I mean, there wasn't much in the area at all. And it was kind of an incredibly smart strategic move, because you weren't ever going to... I mean, Penrith's at the edge of the city and it's got a very large area. And, I mean, this is a club that turned into having the biggest junior base of any rugby league club in the world. It's probably got the biggest footprint in Sydney, I would suggest, along with maybe the West Tigers now. And it's weird to think that back then it was such a smart strategic move, because that's something rugby league doesn't do very often.
No, and it was... I think if we look at it, you could probably say that 67 was the first genuine strategic moves, because of Penrith, what you said, but also Cronulla, because the southernmost team we had at that time was, I dare say, St George. So, it's that moving to Cronulla essentially opened the door for the move further 20 years later when Illawarra came in.
Yeah.
and you start sort of creeping down the coastline. And
Yep.
whereas Parramatta and Manly, we already had North Sydney, so moving to Manly wasn't a huge expansion decision, and we already had Canterbury and West, so Parramatta wasn't too, they were very safe expansion moves, those ones.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think 67 was when the game first started thinking genuine long term and genuine pre-planning, expecting the population boom to come in.
Yeah, and it's that sort of thinking back then, you kind of think that they weren't looking that far ahead. And I mean, even bringing in Canberra was a massive step. Illawarra was probably a bit of a step, but Canberra was a massive one. Surprising that they did that at the time. It's interesting though, because when they brought in Tweed, I wonder if that was as much about because obviously they were looking at the Gold Coast market for the most part when they brought them in, but I wonder if they kept them on New South Wales side of the border for political reasons, rather than having an extra Brisbane team, an extra Queensland team. It just seems weird that they put them, in Tweed heads.
Yeah, I think the reason why they initially thought Gold Coast was Gold Coast had the first country rugby league competition in Australia. Mm-hmm. So they saw that as a safe option to move to because rugby league was so ingrained there.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get, as much as they had the base support there because rugby league had always been there, they didn't have the money coming into the club really.
Yeah.
I think being New South Wales based was kind of a safe move with the purists of the game who supported the New South Wales Rugby League. Yeah. Also, I think there was still a bit of animosity in Brisbane over the Broncos because of the damage they did to the Brisbane Rugby League competition there as well.
Yeah, and that's something to talk about too, because the what we call the Queensland Cup now, and it was the Brisbane competition back then. It was very much. It wasn't an equal of the New South Wales Rugby League competition of the time, but it wasn't far off either. I mean, they had their own legitimate superstars. When their superstars would come into the New South Wales comp, they were straight away some of the best players in the competition. And you could definitely find a bunch of Queensland people that would say, well, it's the equal of, if not a better comp. But just the money was in the New South Wales competition, and that's probably why there wasn't a flat-out merger of the competitions or the Brisbane competition being the one that spurred on what we now know as the NRL. It was just the money was in New South Wales.
Yeah, and that was always, I think the BRL's own issue was the money. I think finding talent was never an issue for them. They had tons of it. They'd set up a statewide comp as well, which was kicking on big time there. So yeah, there was a fair bit of animosity towards the Broncos for quite a while there. So I think putting the Gold Coast team in just on the other side of the border was probably designed to cushion the blow on Brisbane and help them sort of cement themselves and get a good image there because they were still building at that time, even though it only took them 4 years to win their first title. They were still cementing themselves and trying to win over their own local community, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's some of those teams that we've lost. I mean, Glebe was an interesting one there that they basically got squeezed out, and that's maybe something we'll talk about with current teams if teams are getting squeezed out. The Sydney University, though, I mean, for them to be brought into the competition is very interesting. Not having a university team, I mean, they have a university team in rugby union still in the Sydney competition, which I could probably get a run in. But it makes you wonder if they had kept that Sydney University team in the competition, where they would be right now, and whether Sydney University would have a similar sort of setup to what you see in American sports, where they'll have either a gridiron or a basketball team, and they'll use that as a way to basically make money off of them and use it as a recruitment tool. And it's interesting to think that we could have a university team in the competition right now that was maybe playing at the SFS and was used to promote Sydney University and generate funding for the university as well. It kind of throws up that we could have had a different model of a club in the NRL today had they stuck around. But unfortunately, it was just, they had so many lean seasons. They only had really the one good season, and it just obviously wasn't working at the time. But it's interesting to think about if they'd still been around today.
Yeah, I mean, I think a large part of why they end up folding was it was too hard for them to attract players because
Yeah.
even by 1937 they were an amateur side. We still had the war starting up.
Yeah.
Players were either going to stay at home and earn a few dollars playing footy, or they were going to go to war. University just seemed like it was neither of those two options, and it wasn't a win for anyone. They were just going to struggle, and so it was a safe option to put them down. They still exist. They still play. They're in one of the very low tiers of rugby league in Sydney at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might even be a feeder team for another side. I can't remember now. As you know, Glebe's also a feeder team, I think, for Newtown this year.
All right. Yep.
They came back a few years ago. It's good to see them back in those lower grades. But the university one, it was a fascinating and very bold move. And I kind of wish they had have kept them at instead of dropping them completely, I wish they'd have just put them to, say, like reserve grade and just left them there and, have them running around in Jim Beam Cup or something like that because, as I said, it's a brilliant concept that they could have, run off.
Yeah, especially when you consider that at the moment it's difficult for rugby league to get into some of the schools basically in the North Sydney area, and here was rugby league all the way back then having a university team. I mean, there's places in England where they have problems still getting university teams. So it was a forward-thinking move. It just, one of those things that I guess just didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was a good thing though about rugby league in those early years is they weren't afraid to have a crack at stuff like that. And we saw it again in the 1983 period, or 1982 period, sorry, and then again in 88 and 95 where they started looking beyond the heartland of the game, which was always Sydney. They started looking further afield and like, how much further can we spread this? And it's like, let's put a team in Perth, let's put one in Townsville, let's put one over in Auckland. It almost sounds crazy, but we know that there's a Perth team that's knocking on the door that deserves to be there. We know that North Queensland and Auckland survived and are still around. The only team out of those four that they brought in 95 that didn't work out was the one that was right next door to the Broncos. And so it showed that expansion actually does work.
Yeah, it does, and especially when you look at at one point when the two competitions come back together with Super Leagues, we had 22 teams, and they had to cut it down, and they wanted to cut it down to 12 teams, and that was just never going to happen. By the way, there's all of a sudden a big rainstorm here, if you can hear something in the background. But anyway, so they cut it. They wanted to cut it back to 12 teams, but we had 22 teams, and there were some bad sides. But when you look at what happened afterwards and some of the teams that you could have, the Melbourne Storm team was basically what was left over from the Western Reds, or I think they changed to the Perth Reds in that Super League season, and the Hunter Mariners, and they basically took all of the extra players from them and made a team out of them, and that was the Melbourne Storm. It's sad that we don't have some clubs. Illawarra was a sad loss, I think, but having been to Wollongong a lot recently, you see that it would be difficult for the area to generate the corporate funding these days for a club. Canberra was obviously a big leap and one that worked and one that they were probably looking at the influence of country rugby league, especially at that time. But clubs, they come and go, and it's interesting that in Sydney we've already seen in the past clubs being culled and basically having their areas swamped by their neighbours, and I have a feeling we're getting towards that point again right now in Sydney.
Yeah, especially that inner west area there. I think if we want Canterbury and Parramatta to survive in that area, the West Tigers really do need to relocate fully to Campbelltown. Always should have done. There wasn't much existence for them in the Balmain area. And there's that huge nursery out there in the western suburbs. Penrith is showing that just where they are.
Yeah. And that area of Sydney down in the Macarthur region, it's one area of Sydney that can actually grow and grow quite a lot. And you're also going to get the growth down towards the south, towards basically towards Canberra. And it's a very long way to Canberra, but there's that capacity to grow down in that part of Sydney where a lot of clubs, their area will not grow. And I think of someone like Cronulla, who are basically surrounded now. They're surrounded down south. They're surrounded by St George, and up north, not very far at all. It's basically South Sydney Roosters territory. And you have to worry about clubs like that, just as you worry about the West Tigers in the Balmain area of Sydney. I know that Balmain Tigers fans are pretty loyal about the club and stuff, but if that area turned into South's territory within 20 years, you wouldn't be shocked because, as you say, the West Tigers, they really need to say, this is our area. We're not committed to a bunch of different areas. We're not playing games between areas. This is our area that we're going to play in. They've got Campbelltown Stadium, and it's not much of a stadium at all. And I don't know if they play there or if they look to build a new stadium somewhere in that general region. But you just feel like they need to establish that area as their own. Because as you say, that's a Penrith-sized area that in 20 years' time, they might have the biggest junior rugby league area in the world. And whereas I think in the Balmain region, it's kind of holding on to something that probably isn't theirs anymore, really.
Yeah, look, I am an old Balmain fan, so I'm not talking as a Magpie side of thing on the West Tigers merging. It's just, to me, it makes common sense to move out there. I think, it's been 20 years. It's too long for this West Tigers side to be like a bunch of gypsies still, floating around the countryside playing home games wherever they want to try and please everyone. They're just going to, just pull the pin and say, right, this is where we're going to go. We're going to move to Campbelltown. We're going to be based out there. And for all we know, if they were playing a lot more games at Campbelltown, it might be enough to get the local government or local council out there to go, okay, you're now playing games here all the time. We're going to start pumping some money into the stadium and get the thing upgraded and make it a genuine NRL stadium that people can go to and we can get, decent sized crowds at, and it looks good on TV and all that sort of stuff. You're not going to get that if you're playing 3 games a year there.
No.
They're never going to upgrade Leichhardt Oval. The place has got wide ends through some of the stands. They need to pull it all down and rebuild some of those stands.
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's like at the moment the poor West Tigers fans. They're either at Leichhardt Oval, which is just a relic. It's got to be one of the worst stadiums for any professional sporting team in the world. And you've got that, and when they're playing at their alternative stadium, they're playing at Campbelltown Stadium, which is a basic bones stadium compared to most clubs. And as we move towards having a brand new SFS, and we've got the new Parramatta Stadium, we're going to have the brand new Olympic Stadium, which will be for rectangular sports only. I think we're really going to see the clubs that don't have good stadiums. They're either going to have to put together a really good case to either their local council or the state government to upgrade, or they're going to have to really look at moving, mainly because they're going to lose fans. I'm going to go and watch games at the Parramatta Stadium. I'm not a Parramatta fan. I'm a Panthers supporter. I think that the viewing of the game in these brand new, beautiful stadiums in Sydney, it's really going to change how people think about going to the football, where once upon a time people were like, oh yeah, I like to stand on the hill and stuff. And it's like these days you're going to have massive screens. You're going to have a comfortable seat. When it's raining, you're not going to get wet. You're going to be able to use a toilet without having to line up for the whole half of football. You're going to be able to get a decent feed at these places. It's going to be a completely new experience, and it's just going to be fun to go to the footy. And I see teams that don't have that on offer. I think that once fans have experienced these new stadiums, it's going to be a big eye opener for these clubs. And there's some clubs that I think the West Tigers and Panthers in particular would not find it too difficult to get either major stadium upgrades or completely new stadiums built. But then you get someone like Manly who, I mean, I don't know if Manly looks to continue at Brookvale or if they look to move to Gosford or if they look to maybe get a stadium built just in the North Sydney area, and instead of just being in the Manly Sea Eagles saying, look, we can either barely survive being Manly or we can take over this giant chunk of Sydney where we basically have no sporting competition at all and make it our own. And that's got to come into account at some point, especially with a privately owned club, because just surviving is not going to be enough. And just surviving is eventually going to become not surviving as other teams get stronger, as their finances get better, as we expand the competition so that you've now got more cities to compete with than we have right now. Eventually, some clubs are just going to go by the wayside, and rugby league has a history of it. You don't want to be the next Glebe. You don't want to be the next Sydney University.
That's right. And Manly they are just in a perfect spot there. They need a new ground there. The problem with a lot of these teams too is, a lot of their attitudes are very cutthroat when it comes to football grounds. Look at it very romantically.
Yeah.
They get all glassy-eyed over, Planet Brookie, Fortress Brookie, or Planet Leichhardt Oval. I mean, I love going to Leichhardt Oval. I'm a historian. I like going to those old grounds, but you got to face the facts. It's not a good enough venue for playing footy at or watching footy at.
Yeah.
I'd love nothing more than have 15,000 minimum seat stadium in there. You can still have Buddy Hill there, but still have proper stadium seating in there that people can sit in. Brookvale is just, there's no reason why that ground can't be just completely gutted and put brand new stands in there and properly fix it up. It's long overdue.
Yeah.
These grounds, we can't be moving into this century now, and we're moving into getting broadcast deals worth billions of dollars, and we're playing in grounds that look like they were made for about $35 by Joe's Stadium building down the road. We've got to get better at this. They've got to look better. They've got to operate better. They've got to function better.
And the thing is, too, I mean, you can watch a game live at home in high definition now. It's the perfect sport for TV. You see everything. You really don't miss too much. And you can either do that and pay, I don't know, whatever Foxtel is, $50 you can watch the footy for, I guess. Or you can pay, $20 to get a wet patch of grass on a hill. And you looked at the Manly game the other week, people were getting absolutely thrashed rain on. And it's like, for the vast majority of people, this is not how they want to spend their afternoon. This is not what they want to do. This isn't fun. I tend to be a bit of a snob like that myself. I like a seat. I grew up sitting on the hills, especially my friends were all Parramatta fans, so we'd go to Parramatta Stadium to watch games. And, it was fun, but I was a teenager, and give me a seat every day. I think that once you've been to a really good stadium and you see the difference in experience, you realise that Sydney misses out a lot in that regard. I remember the first time I went to Suncorp Stadium, and I was just shocked at the experience of watching football in such comfort, and it just was like there wasn't a giant lineup just to get into the ground, and it was a sellout. It was the World Cup final. It was the first time I went to Suncorp Stadium in 2008. There wasn't a lineup to get into the ground. I sort of walked in and I was in the stadium, and I was like, did I miss something? Did I pass a checkpoint by accident? Like, it was really weird. I expected someone to run up and say, hey, we have to search you for 20 minutes. We don't have that experience in Sydney anywhere. The Olympic Stadium is a terrible viewing experience to watch a game of football at. The Sydney Football Stadium it's outdated now, and it was absolutely terrible to get to for 95% of people in Sydney. Parramatta Stadium was okay, but still not 100%. Penrith has gotten better and better, but, when it's packed there, you don't want to be going to the toilet, let me tell you.
No.
There's so many different grounds. I mean, I just can't pick a Sydney stadium that you go, oh yeah, that's fantastic going there, because there just isn't one. They've all got their problems, and I think that once we've got all of the new stadiums in place in the SFS, the Olympic Stadium, which I think will be a big one, and Parramatta Stadium once that's going in a couple of weeks from now. Actually, I think it's going to change attitudes to rugby league in Sydney in a big way. And I think we're going to see a lot of teams say, "Hey, we got to do something now, because we're going to lose a lot of people if we don't."
Yeah, especially if we keep getting attacks on poker machines and stuff like that from governments, then clubs can't rely on that. Let's be honest, easy money coming into the club. They've got to start relying more on gate takings, and you can't jack up the prices because that pushes people away. So you've got to have more seats for people to sit on.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as that. You get more seats for people to sit on, a bit more comfort. They will come, and they'll be able to come and watch in the rain. That's the problem with these suburban grounds is too much. Nearly 50% of a lot of these grounds, there's no seating. It's just the hill.
Yeah.
And while it's great on a lovely sunny day in the middle of June, it's just not enjoyable when you're sitting there in the miserable cold, howling wind and miserable rain at 7:00 on a Saturday night, trying to watch a game of footy.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it's great for people to say, "Oh, I love going to this old oval and stuff," and it's like, yeah, you're sitting there with 5,000 other people. Like, there's not much of you. We don't keep these things going for nostalgia. We've got to make the business work, and at the moment there are too many teams that are getting 5,000 crowds, and it's because the game day experience is just not that good, unfortunately. Mostly, and we're talking about Sydney here. You go to Brisbane, they've got no problems. You go to Melbourne, they've got no problems. The North Queensland Cowboys, their new stadium is going to be ready by next season, they reckon. Even the Gold Coast, the Gold Coast don't get too many fans there, but damn, this stadium is beautiful. There's so many places. Newcastle's stadium now is almost an all-seater stadium. It needs to change, and as it does, we're going to get more people through the gates, because, and it's not just people now, and it's not just to cater for the, 40, 50, 60-year-olds. It's to have the kids that can stay at home and, watch it all on TV, to get them out to the game and to give them a big screen they can watch close-up replays on and make it a full experience, so that instead of people saying, oh, the best way to watch rugby league's on TV, they're saying, no, you can have that experience and go to the ground and get the atmosphere as well.
Exactly. Can't agree more, mate. The families one's a big one too,
Oh,
the
huge.
first thing I'm going to look at if I've got to go to the footy with my 4-year-old is I'm going to look at the weather. I'm not going to look at the ground.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be raining, I'm going to say I'm not going.
Yeah, exactly. And you just take into account, if you're taking a family to the footy, for a lot of places you're going to be paying a lot for parking. And then you've got to feed your kids, and a lot of these grounds have food that's just too expensive. You've got to pay for the seats, and look, the seats cost what they cost. But then if at the end of all of that, you're trying to get your kids to sit on the grass, it's like, what am I doing? I'm not doing that to my kid. It's like, we'll just stay at home, I'll order pizza and we'll watch it at home. That's, make sure your kid's fat. That's what I say. Have fat kids, order pizza.
That's right. Also, you get them up on some Ritalin so they just sit there and stare.
Yeah, it's great. And they concentrate for the whole game.
Concentrate zombies, same sort of thing.
That's what we want. Maybe that's what the NRL should start doing at junior league matches. Just start getting everyone on Ritalin so that they can say, look, we have a big participation numbers, but they give 100% of their attention to rugby league. It'd be great.
Fully agree. So, do you think there's teams that we could, look right now at relocating?
Well, in Sydney, and they're all Sydney clubs for the most part. I think the only non-Sydney club that there's ever been a thought of movement for that club is maybe the Gold Coast. So we'll talk about them really quickly. They don't really need to move, but they have played some games in Brisbane. Brisbane and the Gold Coast are pretty close to each other. I think it's probably more a case of the Gold Coast trying to tap into the corporate market in Brisbane as much as anything. And that movement would probably stop once there was a second Brisbane team in place. But they're really the only non-Sydney club that you would think about any sort of movement with. Would you agree with that?
I think the big problem is for the Titans if a second Brisbane team comes along, the Titans are going to struggle immensely. And so I'd be more inclined to have the Titans move north in towards the Brisbane market, not in Brisbane, but maybe based in Logan, Ipswich region.
Yeah.
That way they can still play games in the Gold Coast. They can probably play half their games there every year and half the games in that Brisbane region there. Have them dipping into the two markets, and hopefully down the track they can become sustainable enough and have built a strong enough following that they can sort of relocate back towards the Gold Coast region.
Yeah.
But we'll have also built up a bigger corporate area and bigger interest for rugby league that might warrant a second Brisbane team as well as a Gold Coast team. I want to see teams successful. I don't want to see teams being axed anymore. I think there's too much of that. Yeah. So I think the concept needs to be looking at how can we make the Gold Coast stronger. There's no reason why they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think that's possibly the idea they need to look at.
Yeah, they definitely up there. I mean, they started off really being a community-based club, and with all of the issues that the club eventually ran into, they really burned a lot of bridges in the community, and they're really having to work hard to get those links back with the community, I think. And, it's a privately owned club now, I believe. So they do have the capacity, if they wanted to go straight to Brisbane if they wanted. But I think that, as you say, there's a good base there on the Gold Coast, and that stadium's really, really nice. I think it's just a case of, weirdly enough, giving them time to grow into the area. And I think having a second Brisbane team would actually help the Gold Coast, because I think it would kind of solidify the NRL community there. It would give them more local derby games, and I think that would help them as well. And I think the other thing the Gold Coast maybe has to do too is start to look at the general region around them as well, not just focus on the Gold Coast. They need to become a catchment area club, almost like like what St George does with Illawarra and what the Canberra Raiders do with the region around Canberra. They need to be a whole of area club. And that's going to take time. I think that they're still working on some of the issues they had under previous management. I think they'll get there, but at the same time, I could see where if they had, say, 5 more lean years and the league was absolutely crying out for that second Brisbane team and they were finding it difficult to make that happen, I could see where the Gold Coast said either they were going to do a 50-50 split, or they'd make a full-time move to the Brisbane market and maybe sort something out to play Sydney clubs games at the Gold Coast Stadium.
Yeah, I think too the clubs get a small grant or a decent sized grant from the NRL if they do relocate into a new market. So that could be something they'd look at to pick up a few dollars. If they do it for 5 years or so, it may not need to be long term, but it might actually help to build a stronger market in Brisbane, as well as secure the Titans financially so they can move back to Gold Coast and kick on from there. Yeah,
that's a good point. So that's the non-Sydney clubs. Now let's be really brutal about the Sydney clubs. And we're going to piss people off here. I'm going to throw my club into the mix just so nobody thinks that I'm being biased against certain clubs or anything like that. So the clubs that have been talked about for movement, let's say it's the Penrith Panthers. Let's say it's the West Tigers, because their name gets brought up.
Yep.
The Cronulla Sharks, the Manly Sea Eagles. I don't think you could talk about the Sydney Roosters until such time as the ownership of the club changed.
Yeah, Nick will have to die before that changes.
Yeah, and quite honestly, yeah. And it's not something you want to talk about because he's been a fantastic supporter of the club, and I think that they're going to have somebody take over that club pretty quickly once that happens. But I think that it's not fair to talk about the Roosters just yet, even though, look, there's a lot of reasons why I I think you should move the Roosters, but they're not moving anytime soon, so why bother talking about it? So we've got 4 teams. Are there any other teams you can think of that you could say maybe they're a candidate to either relocate or they're just in the relocation discussion?
I think for me, the Dragons, but not so much in a wholesale relocation. I think if the Sharks were to relocate somewhere, the Dragons can stay as is. But if the Sharks had to remain, then I think St. George would need to find a way to relocate to the Illawarra region, which is hard because, as you said before, the Illawarra region doesn't really look like it's got enough sort of support around there to run an NRL team.
Yeah.
But in saying that, St. George has had their own financial issues in recent years, so it's sort of 50-50.
Now they're owned by the person that basically owns Win TV, which
that's true too.
Yeah, so their financial situation now is a lot better than it has been, and I think what we will see is the club consolidate a little bit of strength, and then they'll start to become very rude in terms of how much they spend on rugby league, where they're at in the player market and things like that. I think that I could make an argument for them playing more games in Wollongong for sure, and the Gong is definitely Dragons territory now.
Absolutely.
But the good thing that St. George have going for them, and I don't think there's, maybe Souths are the only other team that could do this. St. George could literally play out of the SFS, or they could play out of Parramatta's brand new stadium, or they could play out of the new Olympic Stadium when that's built, and claim that as their own. They're one of those, and I think it goes back to their history where they used to be the match of the round.
Yeah.
And they were, in a way, Sydney's big club. I think that they have that capacity to say, look, we're moving away from, Jubilee Oval or whatever it's called these days, and we're going to stake our claim, maybe at the SFS, for instance, or a nice stadium in Sydney, but then also have down into Wollongong and retain their traditional area at the same time. I think they're a strong enough club to do that, and I don't think there are too many clubs you could really say that about. So that's one of the things about St. George, where relocation, I don't think they're a relocation candidate in the sense that we're talking about moving completely out of Sydney, but you could see them not. I could see in 10 years' time where the Jubilee Oval isn't used for rugby league anymore. Yeah,
I think one of the main reasons why I think a move for St. George to the Illawarra region would be largely because they are very good at bringing through country rugby league players. They've had quite a few players just from where I grew up in the Riverina. And so if they're based in that Illawarra region there, they've got a bit more access to country players around that Illawarra area there. Yeah. And they're good at bringing those guys through. Not many Sydney clubs are good at bringing through country rugby league players, but the Dragons always have been. So they'll just sort of be part of that there. It keeps that link with the bush going there. It helps them bring through more of that talent, which I think would help them stay strong. Yeah. It would also allow Cronulla to have a little bit more breathing room as far as they're concerned if they were not to be a team to be relocated. So that's kind of the thinking behind that one there. That would be the only other one I'd think that you could probably look at. But as I said, it wouldn't be out of, moving them to Adelaide or anything like that. It would just be moving them to Illawarra or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
If the Sharks were to go, then obviously they'd take over the Cronulla area. I doubt that would go down well. But it'd just be like it was for the 40 years that the Dragons were there before the Sharks came along anyway. So
yeah, it's interesting because the club boundaries, and being from Western Sydney, it's not really something I ever thought about because just pretty much every area out here is Panthers territory. But I think it would be good for the NRL to bring out a club boundary map. I think it'd just be interesting to see, and I think it would maybe change the aspect of how people think about Sydney clubs. And I know why they don't do it, because they don't want to box in a club. And I'll use the Dragons as another example. The Dragons could play at the SFS and say whether St. George, Illawarra Dragons, and get people from all over Sydney coming and watching the Dragons game. But if they put out a map saying, well, this is Dragons territory, it could become a point that alienates certain sections of your supporter groups. And but I also think that it would show some of the issues that we have of overcrowding of clubs in Sydney and where the problems are. And it's mostly east of the Parramatta region. I mean, Parramatta's got a pretty established base. I think that Campbelltown and the West Tigers area, if they went down there full time, that's really established. That's fine. Panthers area is pretty established. But once you start going towards the east, it starts to become shocking that some clubs have such a small area that they draw players from, that they draw their supporter base from. And I think that would be a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we're really looking at the Roosters and the Rabbitohs there too. They're hemlocked on one side by the ocean. Yeah. And then by each other in the middle. Yeah. And then they've got clubs all around. I mean, the Roosters more so because they've also got the heads there. So they can only move in one direction. That's towards another team. Yeah. So they're pretty much gridlocked. They've got the same issue expansion-wise of their area as the Sharks do, where they're trapped either by geography or by another team. Yeah. Money's the one thing that keeps those two teams where they are, and a bit of a misty-eyed, looking at the history and stuff, given they're the last two, foundation clubs. Yeah. And it also, I mean, Roosters territory, it's very small. Rabbitohs have really tried to move across Sydney, and I think they genuinely do have a lot of fans across Sydney, even though sometimes them fans don't turn out to their games. But, part of me wonders whether the Roosters should just, and I remember John Singleton saying this a number of years ago, he said, look, they should get rid of the Roosters logo. That's never going to happen, I don't think. He said they should call themselves the Bondi Rugby League Club and embrace that they're a very small club for a very small area, but that's what they are, and they spend a lot of money to make sure they compete in the big leagues. And I actually like that idea. I think that if they renamed themselves the Bondi Rugby League Club, it would be fantastic, or even the Bondi Roosters, and just embrace what they are. I think that would help them in a lot of ways. And, I mean, you'd get all of their bloody hipsters starting to wear their jerseys all of a sudden, So, but I think that, yeah, and look, South Sydney, the only reason they're called South Sydney still is because of tradition, because they're not South Sydney at all anymore. It's like bloody Central Sydney. But I think South Sydney definitely throws a bigger net across Sydney, a little bit like the Dragons do, in that I think that South could play a home game in Penrith and they'd still get a pretty bloody good South Sydney crowd turn up, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose we're looking at the other four teams, and as I've already touched on, I think the West Tigers need to be based out in the Macarthur region. Yeah. I don't think there's any merit in the discussion about Penrith relocating. I think that club is strong and they are set, and they've built a very good youth market out there for juniors coming through and stuff like that. It's really a model that other clubs should be looking at, to be honest.
Yeah, and look, I only chuck them in because I don't want to be accused of not looking at my club.
Fair enough.
They have had hard times where they've just been poorly run. I mean, it's like, they have a massive junior base which produces talent for everyone. I mean, every single club in the competition would have a Panthers junior. The representative teams are full of Panthers juniors. It just, they're even trying to build upon their businesses in terms of not just being the massive leagues club. It's funny, when I was a kid, I thought every leagues club was as big as Panthers. I thought it, because we used to go there for like Sunday lunches and stuff, and I seriously thought every single leagues club was as big as Panthers. And when I started to visit other clubs, and I'd be like, why is this club so small? It's like, no, it's just Panthers is massive.
Right. I got
So
a I was going to say I got a little story. Given that I come from such a tiny little rural community,
yeah,
the first major club I went to when I first moved out was
yeah.
Panthers, and I've gone, man, this place is as big as this township I just came from. Oh, it's massive.
And it's weird. It's always been huge, and
Yeah,
like I really was. I was like a little kid, and we'd go there, and they'd have these buffet lunches, and you'd sit there and you'd overlook. They used to have like a couple of temporary lakes. I think they were at the back. This was even before they had the water ski park, which is like, what the fuck am I talking about? Just the water ski park, and it was just, I thought every club was like that. I really did. And then when I realized that every club wasn't like that, it kind of dawned on me. I mean, it's kind of like this weird miracle that they gave this team to Penrith in 1967, and they ended up with this gigantic club, and they've got all of these junior players. And I mean, if they had an upgraded stadium or a newer stadium, I don't think you would even think about Penrith. But I just wanted to throw them in there because I know that the first thing people say is, what about your club? When they're poorly run, they're very poorly run. And I think that just the natural resources probably stop them from folding at points. But the natural resources, you just have to get someone semi-competent in there. And they should be a top 4 side every year, quite honestly.
and look, even when they're poorly run, that club's still making a shed load of cash.
Yeah.
And that's what counts these days.
Yeah, and it's that junior base as well. You can make a really good case that you would have to save the Newcastle Knights just because of the region that they cover and the junior base they have and the support that they have. Penrith doesn't have the same amount of support as the Knights in terms of crowd numbers.
Yeah, not many clubs do.
No, but I think that if Penrith folded tomorrow, the club itself, I think the NRL would be able to make a really, really good case that, look, we have to do an Auckland Warriors / New Zealand Warriors with this club. We need a team there just for the thousands of local juniors. We can't lose that area.
No, they never will. The West Tigers, I think for me, it's the potential that area has if the club fully committed to going, right, we're just going to base ourselves out here.
Yeah.
This whole palaver about trying to please both sides of the whole merger, they've got to stop thinking about West Magpies and Balmain Tigers and start going, you know what, this is a new club. It's been around for 20 years. It's won its own premiership.
Yeah.
We've now got a bunch of teenagers and 20-year-old kids following this club who have never seen the Balmain Tigers or the Magpies play a game of football live.
Yeah.
We've got to grow up. Get somewhere. Move there. And the only place that makes sense is to move out to Campbelltown, get yourself set there, do what Penrith's done. It's not hard. Yeah. Penrith did it.
Yeah.
You know, the people are there. Just get your shit together and sort it out. It frustrates me so much because you still hear people from both sides going, oh, I can't wait for, the Balmain side to piss off so we can go back to being the Magpies, or the Magpie side to piss off so we can go back to being the Tigers. Going, no, neither's going to happen. I'd love Balmain and West to both be back. It's never going to happen. So let's just move forward. And if they keep this crap going any longer and they don't commit to the Campbelltown region, they will be in trouble and they may have to relocate. And thankfully, you got West Ashfield being the sensible partner out of the two. As much as they're aligned with West, they have always been committed to the West Tigers. And we're seeing that they're showing an interest in trying to get a hold of the Balmain Leagues Club, clearing that Balmain debt, and getting a Balmain Leagues Club. They're working to get a Balmain Leagues Club rebuilt on that same site where the old one is. That's the sort of commitment that needs to be happening. Why can't we get West Ashfield running the West Tigers and say, right, we're going to base them somewhere, and we're going to base them out at Campbelltown and just go from there and just get it set. Sure, there's going to be people who are going to get the shits over it, but you know what? So what? That decision has to be made if the club's going to survive and grow and thrive into the future. Otherwise,
100%.
That relocation is a huge threat.
Yeah, and look, and almost Look, I can't imagine that the NRL, if the West Tigers folded tomorrow in the same scenario as Penrith, I think it would be a little bit of a harder decision for the NRL to say we need a team there. I think what you'd probably find would be an existing club would look to take her, and
Yeah.
I think it would be the Bulldogs, not so much moving that direction, but I think they'd try and take that area. And
I think
Penrith would take some of it as well.
yeah, I think the Bulldogs and Penrith would pretty much just share in that area.
Yeah, yeah,
Penrith would probably take over more of it because they're good at covering that sort of massive land space.
yeah.
They know how to manage that a lot better than the Bulldogs do.
Yeah, and it's funny because it wasn't a few weeks ago. I think it was the Panthers' current CEO was saying that we probably have enough talent in the Penrith district to run two clubs. And I'm pretty sure he was talking about expansion at the time anyway. And I mean, I can't even imagine what a junior base for the Panthers would be like with that big of a catchment area. I mean, funnily enough, they might actually start looking at playing games at Parramatta, start muscling in on Parramatta territory, call themselves the Western Panthers or something. But it needs to be the West Tigers in that area. And they need to commit, and they need to build. They need to have their base there. They need everything there. They can't do this split thing anymore because, as you say, it's been 20 years. It's 20 years of a new club, and they just need to move on from that.
Yeah, fully agree. First, we have Cronulla we were going to talk about as well. Because actually, I had something to stem off from your Penrith one, but I'm going to save that for the next part because it'll link in really well. So we'll go to Cronulla and talk about their relocation risk, I guess. What are your thoughts there?
Well, look, Cronulla fans don't like me, and that's fine. Cronulla is one of these clubs that are squeezed. On one side, you've got the ocean. The other side, you've got St. George, which, if it were a lot of other clubs, I'd say, yeah, don't worry about them. But it's bloody St. George, It's St. George Illawarra Dragons. It's going to be hard to overcome that supporter base. I don't know what they look towards for their future. I know they own their stadium. I was reading the other week that with this new development that they've got in place, they've actually done a deal where instead of getting payments out of this new development ongoing, they basically get a lump sum, and that will be it. Now, it'll be a big lump sum. I believe the figure I saw was $40 million.
Yeah.
But if I was running the club, I would have gone for the, continual cash out of that development because that's an income stream, When I saw that they were going for the lump sum, that really, really scared me for the club because whoever they got that lump sum off is going to be looking at it from a completely business point of view, and they're not going to be able to go back for some more money once that deal's done.
That's exactly it. And given the Sharks' bad run with finances, any genuine revenue stream that they can have, they should be hanging on to. And lump sums are they're just bad because you have one bad decision, you blow a lot of that money. That's it. You're done.
Yeah. Especially when you own, because they own their own stadium, which means anything that happens to the stadium, they've really got to think about, like, that's our money,
Yeah.
We've got to do that.
They've got to shell out for upgrades. They've got to shell out for maintenance on there.
Yeah.
That comes out of their pockets. And that's a large reason why they've had those financial problems over the years too, is, upgrading the stadiums and putting in extra seating and stuff like that. That stuff costs money and it comes out of the club pockets. So while they make more money, I dare say, than a lot of clubs do for home games because they don't have to worry about paying rent, they've got all the maintenance costs, all the lighting costs, all the, rates costs, and God knows everything else that comes with it. So, it can't be seen as being the huge benefit that a lot of people refer to as, when they say they own their own ground. You've got to have the people pouring through the gates every week to make that a genuine, viable asset. If you get your crowds of 9,000, 10,000, more weeks than not, it's neither here nor there as far as an asset goes.
Yeah, and the thing that worries me too is that it's not like they haven't been successful over the last, say, 10 years. It's, you couldn't really ask for too much more on-field success for the club. And it's not like you're looking at their crowds and you're seeing them packing the stadium every week, or even just having bigger than average crowds. If the crowds were bigger, you would say, oh, look, they're doing all right. There is a base there that they're servicing, and it's a sizable base. But I don't know that that's the case with the club. And, they've got a long, long history of struggling with finances going back to almost basically day one. They've had their off-field issues, but I think that every club has its off-field issues. That's sort of a cyclical thing. You can't blame that for anything. But I just worry when you see a club have a really, really good time of it on the field, but off the field they're just surviving. I always think that's a really bad sign. And so between the fact that they're in a very small area to draw upon, that they've basically taken this lump sum of money rather than money ongoing from this development, which is supposed to be the golden bullet for the club's survival. And they're just not where you want them to be, even with all the positives that you can look towards for the club. I worry about their long-term future. I think that they've obviously got a really strong brand and name in the word Sharks. I mean, Sharks is a really easy logo to sort of sell, especially to kids. I wonder if you could, and look, I don't want any club to relocate. In an ideal world, no club's relocating. But if you had to relocate the Sharks, I wonder if you could play if you could move them to, say, Brisbane, right? And play their home games in Brisbane, but then any Sydney away games they play a lot of them at Shark Park. So you're still servicing that Cronulla region with games. It would take a little bit of work between all of the Sydney-based clubs, but I think that a relocation plan like that might be able to work for the Sharks better than most other clubs. But then you've got to wonder whether a market such as Brisbane would want to adopt a Sydney club like that. And I think Brisbane in particular would be a little hesitant to do it. Whereas you might get at, say, Adelaide. I don't think Adelaide would care who went there. They'd just be happy to have an NRL club. Especially, I mean, Adelaide Sharks is, that's where Great White Sharks are, around that region of Australia. Perth, I think it'd be similar in that I think the Perth Rugby League have said that, look, they will take any rugby league. And if a club is to relocate, they would rather their own club, but they'll take anything. But I think Brisbane would be a little bit different. But I wonder if a plan like that could be put in place where the Sharks, if they had to move to ensure their survival in the competition, whether you could move them to a different city and have them completely based in that city but play their away games in Sydney at Shark Park.
Yeah, if you could work that out, I think the Sharks would probably seriously look at it.
Yeah.
I don't know if teams would be wanting to play their home games at Shark Park against Cronulla, though.
Yeah, it'd be a workaround that the NRL would really have to do something with, and I don't know if it would be guaranteed money or something like that. It would be given up a bit of an advantage in terms of, it would be Sharks' home game, basically. But I think financially the NRL could probably make incentives for clubs. But then you start looking at how financially viable is that overall. If overall the club is losing money because they've got to put that in place, then a relocation isn't worth it either.
That's right.
But I think if it's, and I thought about this during Super League and when they were talking about culling teams, in Penrith were, because they were so poorly run, they were on the edge of that cull a lot of times. Would you support that club if it moved? And it's a hard question, and it's one that I don't think you can answer until your club has been moved. And I don't know how it would work. I think we've seen a few other examples in other sports, but it tends to be a case of the team that moves, they end up, the best way to do it is to move and basically say, we're here, this is our new place, and it was nice having that old history, but we're here now, and this is our new home, and sort of leaving everything behind. I think unless you do that, you're kind of trying to keep it's a bit like the West Tigers scenario where you've got a foot in both camps and it doesn't really work.
That's right. It's okay, I think, if you want to do the whole foot in both camps thing for 1 or 2 years to help with that transition process.
Yeah.
But the end goal has to be after X number of years, be it 5, 10, whatever it is. Well, not 10, but 5 years maybe.
Yeah.
We're going to fully relocate and be located over in this venue here, and I think it's a decision that a lot of clubs would look at if they had to relocate. They look at it very half-heartedly. They wouldn't be keen on it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be part of the problem. The community would be just as disinterested in the whole idea, which is why, for me also, relocation doesn't really make sense. I just think that, unlike teams and players come from everywhere now. They're not under residential rules where they live in the community that they, where they represent. Yep. Whereas the fans generally do. Most of the Sharks fans are going to be living in the Cronulla-Sutherland region.
Mm-hmm.
So if you relocate and put that team somewhere else, all of a sudden all your fans can't get to the game, and you're hoping that the team that the area they move to will go to that game more so than the area that they just left.
Yeah,
it's a hard one because then you've got all those fans that are sitting there in Cronulla who would be going to a football game that are no longer going and probably lost to the game. So you need to make sure that where you relocate to, you're going to end up picking up at least the same number of fans as what you just lost. Otherwise, it's a net gain of 0, really.
And I mean, that's why I would look to somewhere like a Brisbane, because I think you could move a club there, and even if you just got the people that didn't want to go to Broncos games, you're probably going to get close to 20,000 at Suncorp Stadium, and you're also the sponsorship is going to be just wildly better because you're going to be one of 2 teams in Brisbane, so that's going to be huge. And the TV audience that you're going to have is going to be much bigger, and you're going to be on free-to-air TV on a much more regular basis because you're one of the Brisbane clubs. But so that's why I use Brisbane as the first example, because I think that most clubs could go there and probably from Sydney and probably be in a bit of a better situation. But it really is still a gamble. And I think what you would be more likely to see happen is, instead of a relocation, because of the way the NRL licenses are, I wouldn't be shocked if at some point, if we see a club get to a point where they're in really deep financial trouble, instead of it being a relocation, I think you'll see a license move, and that's how they'll tart it up. And they'll say, the club folded, we have the license, we've moved that license to this new area. And that might allow a new entity to be made. But I think that the club movement would be in the future. I don't think it'd be a club movement. I think it'd just be a license exchange, quite honestly.
Yes. And speaking of new clubs and license exchanges, I guess we can move on to our ideas for expansion areas.
I want to talk about Manly first.
Manly. We forgot Manly.
Yeah, so did everyone else.
No surprises there.
Yeah. Oh, they're still in competition. Oh,
sorry, Manly. We thought you'd die with the Northern Eagles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank God for the Bears, hey, Manly fans. Without the Bears, you'd be dead.
Well, I'll go quickly. I've always had this idea that Manly should probably think about moving up to the Central Coast somewhere just to get to that better stadium, and start looking after that Central Coast region there. I know the Bears have been wanting to come back and look at the Central Coast, but in my view, I don't know there's enough support in north of Sydney and up the Central Coast for 2 teams. And I think Manly should cover that whole Central Coast down to the Manly-Warringah area. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't.
See, if I owned the Manly Sea Eagles, and I don't, but if I owned them, I would be looking to make the Manly Sea Eagles a northern Sydney club. I wouldn't just be... I think you could keep the Manly name. You definitely keep the Sea Eagles name. It's another really good name. But I would look to be spreading their wings to not just be Manly anymore. I'd be looking to take that whole of North Sydney region because it's there to be taken. I think we
Agreed.
do. I think we do need a club up there, and I don't think Brookvale Oval is fit for first grade football anymore. I don't know if you look to get the council because it's a council ground. I don't know if you look to get the council to make a new stadium, or if you start looking around for a new place to build a ground that is maybe easier to get to for a wider portion of that northern Sydney region. It's difficult because of the mindset of the Manly Club for many, many years. It would be a very big change to have the club move from Manly itself. It's a really difficult area to get around in terms of traffic. And I think that hurts them in getting crowds because, the traffic up that part of Sydney can be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they can find an area where maybe it would be better to have a new stadium, make it the northern side of Sydney Stadium, maybe work with the A-League and say, look, if you want a soccer team, we'll work with you. We'll get a new stadium built somewhere in this region that's easy to get to. We're going to become a northern Sydney club. I don't care if they're still called Manly, but I think they need to either take over that region or they've got some really tough times ahead because they've got a private owner now who is keeping the club alive, but he's been pretty upfront about the fact that he's not just going to tip money into a burning pile,
Yeah.
He wants the club to start sustaining itself, and it's proving at the moment that it can't. And they're another club that have been through some pretty good times recently and still find themselves where they are right now. And that, as I said, that's a real worry for me when you go through some good times and even when you just come out the other end of it and straight away you're on struggle street, like not just in terms of your on-field performance, but your finances. And Manly are in such a dire position right now. And it really worries me, the future of the club. I don't think moving to Gosford is the answer. I think that Gosford the whole time has been, it hasn't been the golden bullet that people have wanted it to be. I think at the time it was all based around a really nice stadium, which I think is still a nice stadium, but it's undersized for what I think an NRL team would ideally want. And the region it's a difficult region to get around. And it's kind of spread between a lot of little areas that aren't really connected to each other. And so I don't think that Gosford is a good place for any club to be full-time. And I think that, the Central Coast Mariners Soccer Club is a really good example. And I know it's a different sport, but if they're not winning the competition, they're on the verge of being out of the competition. And that's a real worry for them. And I would hate to see a club make that move and it be a bad move, because there'd be no going back from that move. I think if you moved to Gosford and it didn't work, you'd probably be done. And I don't want to see the Manly Sea Eagles out of the competition. I would much rather see them take over that whole northern Sydney region, have a better stadium, make it easier to get to, and still be the Manly Sea Eagles. I think that there's no problems with that, but I think they need to spread their wings a little bit because it's not working where they are at right now.
I think they may still have a bit of animosity towards them from North Sydney over what happened with the Northern Eagles, and that's something that they, instead of running away from it or hiding from it, they probably should just try and address it and try and solve it. And I don't know how, but they need a good PR man over there, because that whole region came from North and Manly hating one another when they both existed. So this is about 70 years worth of animosity to clear up there.
Yeah, and the thing is,
that's a big hurdle.
You got the North Sydney Bears who, they keep trying to pretend they should be still in the NRL, and it's just ridiculous every time you see a story about North Sydney coming into the NRL again. Look, I don't know if it's possible for Manly to take over the whole area. I think it. And I don't know about this, but I'm guessing it would almost be the biggest nightmare in the world to politically have the two areas combined to be one rugby league area that had one rugby league team, and it was all just one junior base. But I think it's something that needs to happen for the good of the greater game, and I think it would be fantastic for the Sea Eagles. I think it would be fantastic for rugby league in that region, which is a little bit different from rugby league in the rest of Sydney. It's weird because the animosity that you talk about, I think, stops a lot of that stuff. And you've got the North Sydney people. And look, have you ever talked to somebody that, misses the Bears that's under the age of 60? Like, they're all fucking old, So a lot of the kids in that area won't even remember the North Sydney Bears. And that's what we've got to look towards. We've got to look towards that area for rugby league in, 20 years from now, and where we want the Sea Eagles to be in 20 years from now. And, it's one of the few areas in Sydney you could say that you could take it and make it something pretty special. And I think that Manly have that ability, but there's still too many people at that club that it's like, oh, it's bloody Manly, and, we're not North Sydney, and we're the Insular Peninsula and all that crap. Yeah. It's like, no, how about we start being a business? How about we start looking at getting more customers through the gates?
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's all I've got on that. I can't think of anyone else that needs moved,
I literally have nothing more to add to that. I think you've pretty much nailed all that very, very well.
That's what she said.
Not to me. Manly's always been a tricky one because of that past and the area they are, but I think we've covered that one pretty well with all of that. Yeah. So we'll look at expansion teams now. What I was getting to before, you're talking about how you had someone there at Penrith talking about how they had enough juniors to have a second team, they believe, out there.
Yeah.
And I think given the way Penrith has done a fair bit of work out towards the Bathurst region, there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking towards possibly having a team based in Bathurst, and they could probably be linked with Panthers and utilising their junior area.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an NRL team, but it could be involved in the second division down New South Wales Cup.
Yeah.
And it could be used as a gateway to probably get a NRL team in the future in country New South Wales somewhere. I'm not fussed where, but Penrith are doing all the right things, moving games out there, and they do have a massive catchment. It would be remiss of the game to have all of that catchment, all of those players fighting over, a 30-man squad list in the Panthers team every year.
Yeah.
We should be trying to utilise more of those players and try and keep them within the Penrith unit if we can, especially if a lot of them are coming from the bush, which is going to happen given they're spending more time out there. And after the city country thing got scrapped, which I was very opposed to, I'm obviously from the bush, so I'm passionate about rugby league out there in the country. The problem they've got out there is ever since the Super League war, all the clubs and the game itself has been focusing squarely and solely on the NRL and making sure that survives and that moves forward, and probably also doesn't want to go through that crap again. And in doing all of that, it's also sort of ignored or forgotten about a lot of grassroots footy outside of Sydney. And I think this could be a move that would really rectify that in a hurry. Obviously, you got population numbers and stadium and whatnot to look at, which would be a bit of an issue. But, we've got a current government at the moment that likes throwing stadiums around. You just chuck one out there.
Yeah, I've got a stadium actually being built in my backyard. Thanks to Gladys, it's great. But, I don't know that the problem I see with having a team based in the bush, and let's just talk about NRL teams at the moment, because I think it is good that the Panthers have looked to make that the link up with the country area. And I'd like to see more teams do it. I think Parramatta should be doing it more, definitely. I think there's a capacity for the West Tigers and St. George to go down south and do that sort of thing. And obviously you get a team like the Canberra Raiders who they could probably do more, but I understand that they've still got issues of their own that they're working through. They kind of think that their catchment area right now is Northern England for some fucking weird reason. But
Just north of Queanbeyan.
Yeah, it's like Canberra's Queensland idea. It's like, yeah, everywhere's bloody Canberra. But yeah, I don't know that you could have an NRL team based in the bush just for the fact that I don't think that the corporate side of it would work. And I think that because of that you're not going to get a business case for it. I can see the Panthers going, and I mean, the Panthers get paid some money from the New South Wales government to go and play out there, and I don't, it's like Visit New South Wales or something pays for it, which all that shit is just fucking ridiculous if you ask me. But I don't know that you'd be able to make a really good case for an NRL team to be, because you couldn't have it moving around, and we've seen that before. The moving around thing just doesn't work.
That's right.
And I can't see a better place to have a team than Bathurst. Like, there's nowhere that really jumps out at me in country New South Wales where you'd say, oh, yeah, that would be a good idea. And maybe down the track where you've expanded to a point where you're now in a position that you're in really rude health as a competition, and you're like, look, we're going to completely subsidise this team. But then I also think you're going to probably have problems attracting players who they're all going to want to live in cities, and they're going to want to live in nice places. And I'm not saying that the country's not a nice place, but when most of the people in Australia live in cities already, they're going to want to live in cities going forward for the most part. And that's why Canberra have had problems getting people down to Canberra, because, you know, it is a city, but it's a little bit different. It's a smaller place. It's, you know, in the middle of nowhere. It takes a while to get anywhere. Like, it's a 3-hour drive to Sydney. And that's going to be a problem attracting players or even keeping players, I think. So I think the way to service the country areas is to, I think you're better off saying, like, all right, Penrith, you've got this region out to Bathurst. You might say, Parramatta, you've got, you know, a region around Orange or something like that. And, you know, Newcastle, we'd even like you to, poor bastards, and it's the only place it's the worst place I've ever been. You go to Tamworth and play a game in Tamworth. Oh, Tamworth was horrible. God damn it. Yeah, I can't even go into it. What did you think of Tamworth?
Yeah, so next.
Yeah, pretty much, That's pretty much sums up Tamworth. I tell you how bad Tamworth was. Tamworth was so bad that I was driving out of there at 7 a.m. Like, I got up early and left at 7 a.m.
You actually got motivated to get out of bed early to leave the place.
Oh, it's terrible. Anyway. Yeah, so Newcastle can play in Tamworth. But yeah, just have different clubs. Just take one game a season to these regional areas. And I think if you did that, you'd probably service those areas enough, especially if those clubs actually linked with those areas and gave the footballers in that area an outlet to play first grade if they're good enough, but also put money back into the junior leagues in those areas.
Yeah, I think there's obviously the reason I brought up Bathurst was because I think something needs to be done in country New South Wales, and I think having a team based in one country centre doesn't need to be covering all of them. I think just one team based there would actually have a huge kick-on effect for the whole state in country rugby league. Something has to happen, and it has to be drastic, and I don't know what it is. So that's why I thought I'd throw up a country New South Wales team based in Bathurst. What's one that you've got that's a bit left field?
Well, I mean, when it comes to expansion, my thoughts are that you've got priorities in the game that need to be addressed in terms of, because you obviously want more broadcasting revenue. You want to be in the right time zones for that. We need a second Brisbane team, because that's going to bring in more money than it costs through the NRL grant in terms of the broadcasters in Brisbane and Queensland. They want to be able to show relevant content in that region. They want to have 2 games that they could show in Brisbane. You want to have a game every week in Brisbane itself. It's a bit silly that the second biggest rugby league city in the whole world, in terms of, you know, how many fans you've got, only has one game every fortnight there on a best case scenario basis. So I think you need a Brisbane team, and the way that it needs to be set up, it needs to be a genuine contender with the Broncos. It can't be the ugly stepsister. It can't be another Crushers. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be just Brisbane. It might be, and we've talked about this before, maybe a North Brisbane side, or you look towards, I think it's Southwest Brisbane, that's growing region. But they definitely need a second Brisbane team, and I think that they can comfortably play out of Suncorp Stadium for the medium term anyway, and not have any problems with losing supporters. I think it's pretty good to get to Brisbane Stadium. The second place I think we need a team is Perth. They're producing NRL talent right now. We've had NRL players that have literally been born and raised and played rugby league in Perth and then had to move over here to play rugby league at a higher level. They've got an all right stadium to use. If you're using the main stadium over there that they've just built, you've got a brand new stadium to use. I think that we definitely want to have a rectangular stadium though for anywhere we play the game. I think playing on these ovals just isn't good enough anymore. And after that, then I think, you start looking at a second New Zealand team. They've got an indoor stadium there in Dunedin, I believe it is, that I would look to take advantage of. I don't know if it would be your first place to put a team, but I want to have a game day experience that is good for rugby league, and I think that the games that are always played there, they get good attendances in terms of rugby league games that have been taken there. And I think you want to build a community, and I think you could do that at that stadium. Whereas if you put a team in Wellington playing at the Cape Tin, it's probably financially the better move, especially for the corporate side of things. But I don't think it's the viewing experience you want to give for a rugby league game. I think that New Zealand could support a second team if you had to put it together this weekend, and they wouldn't be too much worse than the Warriors, especially when you consider the players that the NRL has playing over in Super League and in the lower grades, and just the raw talent that comes out of New Zealand. I also think that a second team, you could probably brand it as being a Pacific team, and we've seen that before. There was a team, they were going to call them the Orcas. I think they were going to call them Pacifica or something weird like that. And they were looking at having a second team, and it really didn't get any steam going. But I think down the track, you want to have at least 3 teams in New Zealand. Another area I would look towards would be PNG, where you would basically admit the Hunters into the NRL. But then you have to look at, do they have the infrastructure to play games at an NRL level in Port Moresby? And I believe they probably do. I don't know that you could have the team based in Port Moresby, though. I think that you would struggle to attract talent to it. I think you could maybe base the game in Cairns or somewhere like that, and then play the home games in Port Moresby. And obviously some games in Cairns would be pretty good, even if they were just the away games for Sydney clubs that wanted to, get they might be getting small clubs at home and they can play a game in Cairns instead. And then from there, I've said before, I don't think the Central Coast is a good place to expand to. I think that it's, you've got Manly just to the south, which is struggling financially, and Newcastle to the north, which you're never going to crack that market. So I just think the Central Coast is a no-go zone for rugby league, for a club to be born or relocate or anything there. We need a team in Adelaide. It's ridiculous that we've got any city in Australia that's got 1 million plus people and it doesn't have a rugby league team. There's, 1 million people in Australia to grow a rugby league team. It's really basic. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that once you've got that second Brisbane team, you've got Perth and Adelaide, then you've got the real chance to expand to new areas and really exciting expansion opportunities in my point of view.
Yeah, look, one team that I've always sort of thrown out there as a bit of a discussion point, which never gets any traction, is a team in Darwin or a Northern Territory,
Yeah,
and I know a lot of those reasons I get a bit of kickback on is because they don't have the population for it and stuff like
yeah,
that. And you just think at the moment we've got three NRL players who are from the Northern Territory,
hmm,
and I think only one who's born in Victoria, maybe
yeah,
two born in Victoria.
yeah,
And we've got a Melbourne Storm team,
yeah,
and since they've been since '98, and so far we have one or two Melbourne-born players, Victorian-born players. Yeah, we don't have a Northern Territory, and we've got three current players from the Northern
yeah,
Territory. So
yeah,
there's the passion there, and it would cover all of Northern Territory, not just Darwin. So I mean that just means Alice Springs as well, obviously. But
yeah,
um, if they're not just a Darwin team, then maybe they could be the one that's linked with, say, a PNG team.
yeah,
The travel distance is a little bit more, but it's not immense.
yeah, yeah.
The climate's almost the same.
Hmm.
You could base them up there. I think there's a market there that's worth looking at, and like you
Yeah.
said before, it's that slight change in time zone, which makes
Hmm.
it good for TV and good for scheduling. We've played games and have been, for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So, and the best part too, there's no other national sports team in the state.
Hmm.
It's asking to be taken by someone. And
Yeah.
that's something that we should really be looking at too. Instead of constantly finding a way to battle against the AFL all the time or the A-League, why don't we go to a national area where we don't have to battle with anyone? We can just move in there, and within 5 minutes of saying, yep, we're going to put a team in Darwin, that whole state is automatically onside.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Every other team that wants to come along and be there is automatically fighting against the NRL, and they will not be on top because they'll always be second.
Yeah. And I think that look, if I was going to start a team in the Northern Territory, and it'd have to be Darwin, I think the thing you would look at that would be your ultimate goal, you would have to look at trying to get an indoor stadium built, because I think
Definitely.
that would be the ultimate that you would go for. The climate is going to be pretty hard in terms of footy, because it's basically going to be year-round summer footy.
Yep.
And as you say, it's kind of similar to what PNG has to deal with. But I think for the NRL, if you could even get a 25,000 seat indoor stadium built, and it's going to be smaller. The problem that you're going to have, as soon as you do that, the AFL they're going to turn up. And I don't know that you could build a multi-purpose indoor stadium there that caters as much for what rugby league needs as AFL needs as well. I think that an indoor stadium is needed for the Canberra Raiders as well, for a similar reason, by the way, in terms of fan comfort. I think if they had an indoor stadium down in Canberra, their crowds would be much, much bigger. But yeah, I think that would be important for Darwin. I don't know about the corporate base there. It's not a very big place. I think you'd probably get a lot of mining companies and things like that would get on board with it. But yeah, it'd have to be something you'd look towards, like a place like that, or Tasmania as well. I think they're in similar situations.
Yeah, great.
But I think that Darwin is definitely a more natural move for rugby league. But I think at the moment, I don't know whether it's ready just yet. I think the playing games there is probably about where we're at. And I think that there's a reason why we haven't got other sports trying to get into Darwin or Tasmania just yet, in terms of like expanding there or having any real momentum to expand there. The AFL talks about Tasmania every so often, but they're not really doing anything to get a team there. But I can definitely see, once you've got a lot of your other bases sorted out, that you would start to look at somewhere like Darwin for sure. But I would, if I was the NRL, my whole pitch to the Northern Territory government, which is actually broke at the moment, unfortunately, would be that we want to bring a team here. It's going to be for all of Northern Territory. We're going to invest all this money into rugby league, but the thing we need is an indoor stadium that is a rugby league stadium only. Or not just a rugby league stadium only, a rectangular sports stadium, soccer can play that stuff. And as I've said this before, wherever there was a new stadium being built, I would always be sitting down with soccer in this country and saying, we both need this and make it just a united force. Even rugby union, I'd sit down with them as well and just, then they can fuck off once it's built. But yeah, I think Northern Territory down the track is something you've definitely got to look at.
Yeah. What else we got on here?
Do you want to hear my real left field one?
I do, mate.
Okay.
I've been trying to coax you into it with some of my sort of weird ideas. So hopefully you've got something that blows mine out of the water.
So we want a team that, because we've got so much talent that comes out of the Pacific and all of the Pacific Islands, we need a team that really, it is a team that all of the Pacific can get behind. And the Warriors get a little bit of that. And I think if you had a second New Zealand team, they would get some of that. We saw what happened at the World Cup with Tonga and Samoa. But my goal would be, and this is, look, it's a little bit left field, but I don't think it's as left field as it sounds at first. What about a team playing out of Honolulu? Okay, so it's a 10-hour flight. That's not that far. I've done it. The temperature is always the exact same. Like, it is literally, you turn on the news and they're like, today it's going to be 27, tomorrow it's going to be 27, and it looks like it's going to be 26 in a week from now, but after that we're expecting 27 degrees for another 2 weeks up. Like, it is literally that. You're going to be tapping into, it is a US market, so you're going to have that. Yes. You're going to have a completely new time zone that you can play with. So you're going to have that working for you. The main thing is the 10-hour flight is not that far, I don't feel like. I feel like that's within the realms of being able to be done. And you would only do it once you had all of your other bases marked off. So you have Perth already, you got Adelaide, you got a second Brisbane team already. This is when you're starting to work towards maybe having a conference system. So you might be able to do something with that would lower the travel burden on, say, a team from Perth or a team from North Queensland and teams like this having to get to Honolulu. I think you would be able to do some work with getting if not an all right stadium built, maybe upgrading a stadium that was already there. They've got what's the stadium there called? Where they used to play in Honolulu.
Is it called Aloha Stadium?
Yeah, I think it is. Now, they've got issues with Aloha Stadium in that it's basically rotting away, and they're looking at having to rebuild it. But it's going to be a college gridiron stadium that they're going to have to rebuild. But you're going to be able to play rugby league there. I mean, it's still going to be a rectangular stadium. It'll be fine for rugby league. It's not. Look, I think you could make it happen. It's a real left field move. I think players would love to play there. It's a really nice place. But the thing is, you would tap into the US market. You'd have a brand new, completely different time zone. You'd have games in. It could become the Pacific team. It's really left field, but it's one that I think you could make work once you had Australia covered. What do you think about a move like that?
It's look, I was a bit surprised when you said it. Not so much because I thought it was a crazy idea, but because it's actually a bit more brilliant than I think a lot of people would realise. Because that you are encroaching into that US market in a very gentle manner. Mm-hmm. And you're still, as you say, close enough to the Pacific Islands to still appeal to them. You could give them some sort of name that covers both, like, I don't know, Pacifica Patriots or something like that. You know, and sort of try and capture a little bit of that Americanism about it to sort of draw it in and get a bit of that big American finance involved.
Yeah.
And it's a good step into the US market from there. But at the same time, it's, imagine if you could field a team out there full of Pacific Islanders.
Yeah, and it's the thing is too. I think that money would probably the two things I see are the problem. I don't think you're going to have a problem getting players going there. I think the players would be rushing to go there.
Not at all.
I think the TV time slot, and I'm not exactly sure how far ahead they are, but I'm sure that you'd be able to cover a time slot that's maybe open for Australia. So the time slot is the main one for me, and it's also the fact that where's the driving force behind it going to be coming from, because I think you need that. When the New Zealand Warriors were up for sale recently, they did have somebody that was talking about buying the club and then playing some games in Hawaii, but it never really got too much momentum going behind it. I think you would need somebody that was really pushing this idea, and I think that that's the big stumbling block for this. But I really do think that it would be a really great addition to the game, and if you'd need to give it the right name, I would and look, I don't know what to call it because it wouldn't be a team for me. But I think if you gave it the right name, you might call it the Pacific whatever, or you might call it the Hawaii whatever. If you gave it the right name, I think that other Pacific Island nations would get behind it, especially if you took a game here or there to Fiji or Samoa and places like that. That would be like the dream scenario for me, would be to see an NRL team playing out of Honolulu and getting a foot in the door in that American market. It's a soft step into the American market, and I think it's one that wouldn't take much effort to make work, but it would be down the line when all of the other bases were covered. And the big thing for me is that players, I think, would be stepping over each other to go and play for a team like that.
Especially when there's next to no Daily Telegraph reporters out there, and they don't have lens that big to see what's going on over there on Mad Monday.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. They'd be able to just they'd be able to have private parties in private. It'd be amazing.
They'd hire Neil Diamond just to turn up in person.
Yeah. Is Neil Diamond alive still? I think he's got cancer.
Yeah, well,
just to bring it all down.
Bring the mood down. But yeah, look, I think one thing they could do with the home grounds thing is, they're going to get 12 home games every year. They could look at just playing one game at Fiji, one at Tonga, one at Samoa every year, and 9 games out of Hawaii. Or they could probably have 2 at each venue or something like that, and sort of spread it out a bit so that the amount of travel, I guess, to Hawaii doesn't become as much. Because I think that's going to be the only sticking point is going to be the travel. Yeah. Because I remember that being a drama when the Western Reds were around. There was whinging about the travel then, and I thought, it's a few hours on a plane. I mean, come on. They weren't complaining about travelling to North Queensland, but they were complaining about travelling to Perth. You just think there's hardly any difference hours-wise. But people want to complain about things, and that'll be the only sticking point. Other than that, I think it's definitely something that should be considered and looked at in the future. As you said, once we've got the game set up on the mainland here in Australia and it's making good money, and we're looking to really make a big bold move somewhere new from there to try and expand the game beyond just what the NRL wants, but help improve it globally. That would definitely be the first step you take.
By the time you get to that point, and if you're looking at having a 24-game season, and you might have a conference set up which helps in terms of who's travelling to where and how many times, you might also have a situation where the the league season is basically you play and this is, keep in mind, once you've got Australia covered, you might have a couple more teams in New Zealand. You might at that point be just playing one game each season against every other team, instead of having a home and away season, and flip it so that you're playing the home team. You're the home team one year, and the next you're the away team. So that your league season might just be play every other team once at that point, and that would help with travel as well. In terms of a Perth team might only have to make that trip once a year or once every 2 years, and that would help out as well, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely some lessons that the NRL could learn looking into that from how Toronto does their deals with home games and stuff too in the challenge. Is it Champions competition, whatever it is.
Yeah,
At the
what's it
moment, I don't
called?
know.
National League
Championship.
One? Championship,
Championship.
that's it. Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. See how that works because obviously that's a bit more of an extreme version, but similar hurdles. So that's something that can be
Yeah.
looked at there. And obviously it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue because they've now got a team that's going to be based out of Ottawa. So
Yeah, and I mean if they're making it work, we can make it work for
absolutely,
sure.
we've got more money than what the RFL would have. So
Yeah.
there's no reason why that shouldn't work. And the revenue that could come from that to tip back in, because then you'd not only just be getting American sponsors on board, but then you're broadcasting the game in America.
Yeah, and with American broadcasters. And if you
Yep.
start getting American players and you're offering the opportunity to live in Hawaii, which is pretty good,
Yep.
and playing professional rugby in
Yep.
inverted commas, you, I mean, it's a nice idea, man.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
tasty, mate.
yeah, and can you imagine? Like, I'm not much a person for going on away trips, but it doesn't even cost that much to fly there anymore. Like, it's $500 round trip. That's pretty good. And
That's pretty much the same as going to Alice Springs.
yeah, exactly. And 10 hours, I think that's on the edge of what you'd want for flight time from Sydney. And I'm going from Sydney just because I know, because I've done it. But 10 hours, I think, is probably on the edge of having to worry too much about things like jet lag and stuff like that. I think you could do the trip there and come back and still be pretty much okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've stumbled onto an absolute gem there, mate.
Yeah, well, I like to consider myself a forward thinker, and that's my forward thinking done for the day.
Right. Well, I suppose that's a pretty good episode done there. Is there anything else we should toss up there?
No, I think that's it. I just want to thank everyone for supporting the first podcast that we did. It was fantastic. We're going to do another podcast that we're going to release on Monday. That we're going to answer some questions and things like that about. And we did get some feedback. We'll mention everyone's names and things like that in that next podcast. So don't think that we've forgotten anyone. If you're listening to this, if you've listened to it for an hour and 40 minutes waiting to hear your name, I'm very sorry. But listen to the next podcast and you'll definitely hear yourself being mentioned, and we'll answer your questions in that. And as always, if you've got anything to say about the podcast, the email address to send all of your suggestions and complaints to is podcast@leaguefreak.com. So, and you can just send an email to that, and you won't be abused or anything. You don't have to worry about it. I'm pretty friendly when I email you back from that. So yeah. So thanks everyone for listening, and remember to look for us now on, what are we on? We're on Spotify. We're going to be on iTunes very, very soon, or if not now already. And yeah, just spread the word. You got to tell everyone, listen to this podcast, because we're just starting it out. We're just getting it off the ground, and we're both really excited to be doing it. So thank you for listening.
Absolutely, and yeah, we had some great response. Over 150 downloads of the first episode already, which is about 150 more than I was thinking we're going to get. But I'm kind of like that. I'm more of a low ego sort of person, so I don't think much is going to happen to anything. I still don't think a rugby league project's that big a deal. But there you go. Yeah, thanks for your support and all the comments and the sharing of the potty. And I'll be getting better every week as well. And I won't be saying things like Perdcast anymore.
Podcast. See, I'd say I'd be getting better as the time goes on, but man, I'm already there.
Mate, no, you just start out perfect. That's just where you were born.
That's what I've always said.
Yeah.
Except for my yelling. I've got to stop yelling at this microphone. I'm sorry.
Look, I didn't want to bring out any. I won't say it. Anyway.
Don't mention his name.
No, I'm not going to. We've done well. So yeah, look, if there's any ideas you've got for things that you'd like us to discuss about, even if you want us to talk about it for 2 or 3 hours, feel free to let us know. You can send it to the email, podcast at League Freak, was it?
Yep, podcast at leaguefreak.com.
.com. You can also contact us directly on Twitter at League Freak or at Andrew RLP. We'll always respond to you and talk to you there, and that's always a good way to get in touch with us, given that we're pretty much always on there as well.
Yeah.
And we're more than happy to make this something that we're fans, and we're just talking about the game as fans, and we want to hear what other fans think and see if we can get what you're talking about through what we're saying, and hopefully, everyone else hears it and likes it, and we can go from there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sounds good. Alrighty. Well, I guess that wraps this one up. Thanks everybody for listening in for episode 2, and we'll catch you on Monday.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.